Partial production funding for A Vision Transformed provided by the Cabell Foundation.
Philadelphia painter, teacher, and designer Edna Andrade has gained recognition for chromatically refined and exquisitely crafted paintings. The design of these artworks mirrors her life, which is balanced by a game-like play that permits intuition and improvisation to coexist with deliberate order. Her Tidewater, Virginia background during the Depression years cast her personality with an indelible stamp. The coastal landscape, with its ever-changing rhythm of the sea, helped establish her vision with its link to the underlying patterns of nature.
Well, all the sort of the main forms like triangle, circle, square, pentagon, hexagon, octagon. These are great organizing things, and I would imagine that the first person, the first man who came out of the trees and took a stick and with himself as the center drew a circle around himself must have thought he had some pretty strong magic, you know. It's been used magically. I'm interested in that area between magic and logic, you know, which I think art falls into. Rivers and the ocean all have had a really romantic and kind of lasting influence on me, and I feel very much renewed when I have some time at the seashore. The wave patterns of water, although I don't think there's any kind of direct thing in work, say, that was a few years ago, it still has been a question of sort of atmosphere and the rhythms of wind and water and things like that are something that really I would like to do some sort of visual equivalent for. At the same time, I was kind of getting out of this work from Maine. I was influenced by my garden in Bucks County and the fact that I was trying to organize my work on a more chromatic basis, whereas the work influenced by Maine had been more tonal. And that interest in chromatic color, that is, all the colors of the rainbow, you know, rather than the colors that you would say shades of gray as the main organizing factor, was really what led me finally into more abstract work. The trying to express it more chromatically. And it was not so about a change of environment kind of helped that too, because I moved in 1955 to this house where I now live in the city of Philadelphia. And we came back here and the forms, you know, the city seemed so rectilinear, and that got into my work almost right away, and I think remains to this day.
Edna Andrade's drawing methods are those of the architect. The T-square, triangle, and compass are her tools. The method is simple yet precise, which frees her from a self-conscious technique and allows her to focus upon the interactive play of shapes and spaces.
mother and father did not have an art background, I'd say, but my father was a civil engineer, and he did bridges when he was a young man. Later, he was in the lumber business, the place where I grew up in Norfolk County. But he was very interested in structure, architectural structure, and he would point out to me, I remember as a little girl, you know, steel bridges. He loved steel bridges, and he pointed to me what a truss was and a catenary curve and things like that. So I had a sense about the kind of order of how, if you're making something, there has to be a kind of order to it. The Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, where I came to school, and the University of Pennsylvania, where I did my academic work at the same time, I mean the liberal arts work, I should say, was a very conservative school when I was there. And it is, I mean, it is an academy of art. And it was a great place to grow up, I think. There was a kind of a romance about being an artist and everything. You were pretty much on your own whether you worked or not. There was no role taking. You went to class, and if you could goof off if you wanted to. Nobody would, you wouldn't, if you were going to the University of Pennsylvania, you had to have a grade. But nobody much, it wasn't a very structured school, but it was, things were there. I mean, the models were posing and you went to work. So the fact that you had to direct yourself, I think, was the most important thing about that. I don't think that I really learned my craft very well there, and I don't use much of the kind of painting methods and all that were used then. I've sort of done other things since. But I think that's part of my education too, that I, the fact that I got out of school not very long before the Second World War, and that during the Second World War I worked really, I went in as a kind of wet behind the ears recent graduate of an academic school, a sort of somewhat impressionist painter, and came out a graphic designer. I learned kind of more about what was going on in the art world in a contemporary way, and I learned more about the psychology of vision during that period than I ever kind of really learned at the academy.
Andrade's early work as an academy student was impressionistic, done in a painterly manner. After World War II, her work from Summers in Maine was more carefully rendered with a decided concern for the techniques of the Renaissance. By the early 60s, her work became fully abstract, losing the immediate appearance of nature.
What one does for a living, too, can have a great influence, I think. I think that my starting to work as a teacher at the Philadelphia College of Art in the late 50s was a big influence on the direction my work took. I became a teacher of design, became interested in the problems that I was giving my students in problems in visual perception. How can you make a circle in a field look like it's light and float up? How can you make an equilateral triangle have a certain direction in one way by where you put it in the field? How can you make two colors vibrate against each other? Or how can you just keep them from doing that? All these problems, and how can you interest the eye in a sort of gradation from one shape to another, from one color to another. All those sort of elementary problems became things that I got into myself. And it was at that time that I had to, I decided that I didn't have to do something, painting something out there, that the painting could be generated just on its own terms. I mean, you could sort of set up a game plan for a painting and it could happen. It could grow like natural things grow. At the same time, my time was very limited when I started to teach full-time at the Philadelphia College of Art, and I had to sort of have a way of painting that didn't depend on how well I felt that morning when I had a few hours to work. I had to have more of a program for what I was doing. And I can understand how women have often had that in Western society, or everywhere probably too. I noticed also in Southeast Asian society on my trip to India that you saw the same quilt patterns that American women picked up, you know, when they had time to work on it. You saw the same in those Islamic patterns that some of the Indian women might decorate the floors of their houses with, or even lay out, you know, on special occasions, marigold petals in geometric patterns on their floor. But it's something that you can do with some program, some plan of what you're doing, and you can pick it up because you've got this plan that runs through.
It goes back to the first time I saw a painting of hers in some public situation that intrigued me. It was after she had given up the figurative work and she was then doing the optical work, and I was fascinated by what happened to my head or to my thinking, to my eyes when I looked at her painting. The work moved and danced on the canvas, and I just looked at one way and I looked at the other way, and there was another painting happening every minute. And I thought it was exciting work, and I vowed I'd just continue to look at her work. And then again I saw it, and I was intrigued by what she had done with practically no color. And again, the same twinkling work. There was a little spot of white on a dark canvas that came to life, and then I realized that there was more than what met my eye in the painting. And subsequently, when I did start a gallery, I think probably the third or fourth show I did, it behooved me to do a show, and this I think was 1968, to do a show of all women, which sounds kind of humorous in today's world, but in 1968 I don't think there was the feminist revolution hadn't started yet, or not quite. It may have been in its birthing stage, but I remember, and I think it's a kind of funny story, I wrote letters to the women artists that I thought I would like to have in the show, and I addressed one to Edna, and Edna responded by saying, no, thank you very much, but no, I refuse to be in a sexually segregated exhibition. And I thought that was the greatest and funniest thing. Later we met, and she agreed to be in the show, I think just because we responded to each other. But I thought it was a very profound and very interesting statement that art shouldn't be known as black art or woman's art. Her art is so strong that it could exist for anybody. It does exist for itself and not because it's a woman.
Philadelphia has a long history in the arts, dating back to colonial times. Center City has blossomed with large public sculptures. The city's architecture varies from neoclassical and Renaissance revival to the modern glass high-rises. Edna Andrade has produced numerous commissioned works for this particular setting. The demands of these projects allowed her imagination to run free. She desires to achieve new solutions to the problems of practical function versus beauty in the environment of the workplace.
Some of the commission work I've done has influenced my painting from time to time. For instance, the paving that I designed for the courtyard of the Salvation Army headquarters here in Philadelphia had a great influence for several years on the kind of painting I was doing. The problem there at the Salvation Army was to create a pattern in the courtyard which would accommodate in an orderly fashion trees, locked into the pattern, and the pattern would connect the two buildings that surrounded the courtyard. The kinds of drawings I had to do for positioning the cobblestones, which the masons that set the cobblestones followed, influenced a great deal of my work for several years that was dealing with wave patterns and then with linear patterns making wave patterns. The golden mean ratio is a numerical relationship of a proportion of 1 to 1.618. Now, that, if you did a rectangle in that proportion, it's a very beautiful rectangle. And, or if you took that kind of a rectangle off a square, it could be a very interesting relationship to the square. It's found in nature a lot. I mean, in the curve of the chambered nautilus that I have up there on my mantelpiece. That sort of ratio is how that curve of that shell progresses. It's very close to the Fibonacci series of numbers, which goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, what about these, 37, I can't remember. I'm very bad about adding in my head, but but one number to the other is very close to that same golden ratio. The golden mean and the golden ratio are found a great deal in nature, and I'm astonished. I belong to a group that met at Penn, the interdisciplinary, at the University of Pennsylvania. It's physicists and biologists and so on. And many of those, in their work in physics and biology, botany and so on, were interested in what they found in nature in this ratio, how a branch of a tree may grow out. You know, the distance between one branch and another may be kind of in the Fibonacci series or in the golden ratio. It's related to even certain kinds of branching patterns in streams can begin to relate to this numerical relation. It's very hard to explain briefly. I use it in a very simple way, but it can become more complicated, and it's very much, it's recognizable as used by artists and sculptors and architects, really from the Egyptians on to the present day. I mean, Le Corbusier was very much interested in it as a contemporary architect. I think also Louis Kahn, the architect. So it follows right on through the history of art. And it may be there because it is in our very nature, you know, in ourselves and as an organizing principle in many natural things.
know, it's difficult to describe Edna's work verbally and say that it has precise lines, she uses a ruling pen, there are geometric patterns. If you just think about that concept, you really don't, you cannot comprehend how much her work evokes a spiritual sensibility as well. I mean, it's sort of like her means are very precise. Her attitude is very precise. Her approach is extremely, I mean, to think that she can do that kind of precise work is unbelievable. However, that's not what you feel when you walk in front of an Edna Andrade painting. What I feel, and I think what most people feel, is a feeling, an emotion that rises above the method.
There's nothing very fancy about the technical thing. I'm not interested in painterly effects. I'm interested in getting as smooth a surface as I can. If I could sort of will the paint to be on there without using a brush, I would like that. Because what I'm interested in is not having the surface of the canvas be, you know, interesting as far as texture is concerned, because I think that I would like the tension between the colors to be just on the basis of a chromatic color rather than on textural relationships. The painting I'm working on now got started because I became very much fascinated by the plans of Hindu temples. The initial concept for this painting that I'm working on was explored in a little collage. Following the collage, when I decided that I wanted to try this as a painting, I made some adjustments as far as proportion is concerned and changed the sort of general scheme, elongated it somewhat, and made a very careful drawing from which I could use in transferring the scheme to my canvas. I'm working with acrylic paint, which I mix up. Right now, I'm in a sort of mixed approximate colors because I'm just putting on the first coat, maybe in some cases the second coat. But I make adjustments, and there'll have to be several coats of paint to develop the kind of surface I want. Hard to know why one makes certain decisions. Sometimes I think they're rather random, but sometimes they are just happening. You have to keep making these choices all the time. Will I put the shape here or here? Will it be red or green, or will it be light gray or dark gray, or what's the shape around that space going to look like too? I'm going to put another shape with it. Am I going to be able to see that the shape of the space as well as the shape of the shape? And so that all those things, you just try to look at your work and it tells you something, and then you tell it something back again, and it tells you what to do next. And whether that's inspiration, you know, that mysterious thing, or whether it's just good luck, no, I don't know. But it is, I think, just a wonderful gift if the work does evoke some sense of some associations that bring it into a realm of symbolism. And that's a very elusive thing. I mean, a symbol can mean one thing at one time and another at another, or can cease to have power, too. So that's why it's very hard to know whether one's work is art or not. It has to be around a long time, and people have to like it enough to dust it off and keep it dry and hang it in a nice place with good light, but not too much light, so the colors fade. Then maybe, if enough people have done that over enough period of time, maybe it's art. You know?
Partial production funding for A Vision Transformed provided by the Cabell Foundation.